What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast, the official podcast of thefantasyfootballfanatics.com. It is Friday, April 19th. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Griffin, joined by CJ, the Hitman Hickman. CJ, what's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
Not too much. Another day, another ranking show, another day closer to the NFL draft, and Jason is not here tonight, two-man show. But, yeah, how was your week? I haven't seen you in a week.
Week's been going good. It's been going all right, man. I mean, work got me from Monday, so I'll try to be consistent and faithful for you guys going into the weekend. That I'm that guy that just gives you that gentle push.
Oh, okay.
Just a gentle push.
Is that what it is? Okay, fair enough. Well, we have an awesome show. Today we'll be concluding our early consensus rankings. Again, we're not super deep diving into these because this is all going to change as we get a lot of news and updates, and obviously the NFL draft in a week's time. So, but we're going to give you our early impressions, our top tier guys, and today we're wrapping up with the tight end position. So, this should be a relatively fast show. It could be a long show, but what we found from doing this in the past is that you spend a lot of time breaking down what could be for a tight end, and then it ends up being that unless you get one of those top 5 or 6 guys, it really doesn't make a difference because it's a streamable position. If you don't get, I would say in this year's draft, one of the top 6 to 8 guys, you're streaming matchups regardless, so it doesn't really matter. We'll talk about the upside, of course, but there's no reason to necessarily make an argument for why they need to be where they need to be, but we'll give you the upside and the reason why we like them at least. So, well, we're going to get into those rankings, of course, bringing you all the top headlines from around the league. Just make sure you guys subscribe wherever you're listening, follow, rate, review. Again, we're on Twitch, YouTube, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, you name it, you'll find us. We are on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. That's the way you can reach the show very easily. On Patreon, if you want to support the show, at patreon.com/thefantasyfootballfanatics. Just take a look for us, you'll probably find us. And with that, let's get into those top headlines from around the league. And we start with a league-wide headline that is simply that the 2019 league schedule has officially been released. Now, we'll probably save this for Tuesday's show, so we have a chance to really sit back and take a look at it because it was, as of this recording, released pretty recently. But we now know all the matchups, who's on the road when, and of course all the primetime games. So that's all very exciting stuff, and we'll be able to look at stuff. One thing that I did notice, of course, is that the Patriots and the Steelers are playing the first Sunday night football game of the year. So that'll be a great way as an AFC fan, myself as an AFC team, to watch my two biggest rivals in my conference take each other down, hopefully. So that'll be nice. Hopefully. I don't know, did you get a chance to look at it? Do you have any particular matchup that stood out for you before we move on?
Without being biased, I just looked at the Eagles. So I'm gonna take a bigger look at it, and then I can be able to tell what's going on. But pretty much the Eagles, man, I got us going 13-3. Basically.
Yeah, you're not a homer at all. Okay, I like it.
Oh, no.
All right, so fair enough. All right, so let's move on to the quarterback position. Now, this is big news because as of the recording that we did for Tuesday's show, this had not happened. In fact, it was looking like it might not happen. But of course, Russell Wilson doubled down, saying if he didn't get the extension within this timetable, he would not sign an extension with the team, and he would, if they franchise tagged him, they franchise tagged him kind of thing. But if he would not re-sign with the Seahawks. He would hit the open market. A lot of people linking him to the New York market as a potential heir to probably the Giants with Eli Manning, because you think the Jets are set with Sam Darnold. They, at least you would like to think that they think that, considering they just burned a first-round pick on the guy. But Seahawks came through, not only giving him a new contract, but making him the highest paid player in NFL history. He got a 4-year, $140 million extension on his contract. Yeah. Crazy money, and that's over 4 years again. Like we look back at some of those first $100 million contracts we were talking about 5-6 years ago, and we talk about how those are record breaking. Well, that was usually over 6 or 7 years for some of them non-quarterbacks. But yeah, here we have Russell Wilson getting that in 140 million. I mean, that is ridiculous money. Yeah. So we would both say probably well-deserved. I mean, these franchise quarterbacks, when they get paid, they generally will set the market one after the other. This now puts him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, which I would say Russell Wilson's done great things, but he's no Aaron Rodgers.
It's not that.
That's just the way these things work.
As far as gameplay, yeah, they mirror each other, but as far as like what has he done in the league? No, I mean both of them have won Super Bowl. I mean, he has more Super Bowl appearances Aaron Rodgers. But as far as gameplay, yeah, I would say, yeah, they mirror each other that way. But outside of that, no, I wouldn't do that. But then, look, we say just reserve. Look, I say just reserve because look at the conditions he's been doing this in. He's been doing it in not too stellar conditions. I mean, when he first started, yes, he had a stellar defense. He had good players. I mean, Marshawn Lynch and then Percy Harvin, and then other receivers that are blanking on right now, but those are most of the things he had. And then when they shifted the era from the Legion of Boom to now what it is right now, yeah, they haven't, like we mentioned before, this team has not drafted well, so this is well deserved with the conditions that he's been in. That he's still be able to got this team to the playoffs. They didn't go far, but at least they got to the playoffs, and hopefully they start drafting better and put a good team, solid team around Russell.
Yeah, he over his career again, like you said, he's had great appearances. There's no denying that, great seasons, but statistically, he's not on the level of Aaron Rodgers. But this is the way these things work. The new franchise quarterback that comes up for a new contract generally will set the market, and here we're seeing that yet again. So now this will inflate, and the next guy who probably, I mean, not say Russell Wilson deserved it. Let's be clear, but the next guy who comes up who probably doesn't is going to probably exceed Russell Wilson's contract, and it keeps going that way. And that's why raising the salary cap doesn't really make a difference when you got to pay these quarterbacks these crazy amounts of money. So let's move on. The Cleveland Browns general manager John Dorsey came out and said that running back Duke Johnson is, quote, a vital part of this offense moving forward, end quote. Now, this is coming after all the news about how Johnson wants to be traded after they acquired Kareem Hunt to back up their own Nick Chubb, two amazing running backs in their own rights. And so it doesn't seem like there's much of a role for Duke Johnson, but so he wanted out. Doesn't look like the team's willing to move him. He's their insurance policy. Obviously, they don't get Kareem Hunt until well into the season anyway, so they want to make sure they have not just a guy that they trust, but a guy that knows the system, a guy they like there. Also, doesn't seem like there's been too much of a demand for him, too much of a market as of now, especially this close to the draft. So, not to say that Duke Johnson doesn't have a good skill set for the league, but I would say, depending on who you draft, you might be able to replace that skill set for relatively cheap. So it's probably going to come down to what teams are able to get in the draft itself before we would ever see Duke Johnson potentially getting traded anyway at this point in the offseason. Anything you want to add to this, CJ?
Pretty much. I mean, I know Philly has been a team that's been in the mix for him. I think the price range was a little too steep for them at this time. I've seen reports that saying if a deal does happen, it's probably going to be happening day of the draft or while the draft is going on. So yeah, but I get it from Cleveland standpoint. Yeah, look, yes, you got these two stud running backs, but just like you said, one you're not going to get until well into the season, and you don't want to, just in case injuries happen to Nick Chubb. Now you're in there with a rookie running back that's learning your system. You're going to be behind the eight ball with that. So yeah, I feel them on them being more cautious with it and probably raising the price tag just to see, so just to get people off so they're good. But I do think Duke Johnson's out of that system after this year, though.
I would say so. I don't have his contract in front of me, but I can verify that if we want to talk a little bit about this next guy, which is Demaryius Thomas got a home. We talked about his landing spot. He had visited with the Patriots. He got signed by the Patriots. He's now reunited with former teammates and coaching staff. So Demaryius Thomas now a Patriot. What are your thoughts on that, CJ?
Well, I think this is total Patriot move. I mean, bringing in a veteran wide receiver into this offense. He doesn't have the explosiveness that he's had before in Denver, but I think he can still be a solid contributor to this offense that's desperately needed wide receivers. I mean, you got Edelman, you got Josh Gordon with the suspension going on. You don't know if it's going to be another full year or what's going on with him. And then you bring Demaryius Thomas in there. He's sliding right into a role that he's wanted. This is where this team needs it, man. Because I'm probably sure they're gonna go get them a young wide receiver in this draft and mold that young wide receiver between these two veterans. They would have shown the Patriot way, and yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen. So this is a total Belichick move, and he's probably gonna end up producing for somebody in fantasy.
I forgot that going into the year last year, Duke Johnson signed a 3-year extension, so he's under
Oh wow.
contract for 3. So this is year one of the extension. He had last year, then 3 additional years, and he signed a 3-year, $15.6 million extension. I forgot about that. So he's actually under
Okay.
contract with the Browns
He
through
ain't going nowhere.
2021. No, he's going nowhere. I mean, unless some team wants to absorb that
Just trade
contract, they would have to trade him, because the dead cap is, I mean, this year alone, they would lose $1 million. Next year they have an out built in, they would save money, but yeah, this year unless they're able to actually trade him, it's not like they're going to cut him or anything. But yeah, Demaryius Thomas, this is a very typical Patriots move. A guy who is perceived to be a high risk, a guy who's been incredibly productive and has the tape to back it up in the past, and they're able to get him on the super cheap. He comes in and immediately alters our projections at the wide receiver position that we covered last show, because this completely changes Julian Edelman's draft stock. His draft stock, at least for me, was based on the fact that he was the only receiver in town, really. And now they bring in Demaryius Thomas, who's going to push to be probably their outside guy, who's going to get more one-on-one looks. Edelman is a slot guy, so this changes the entire dynamic of that offense. But I think this is a good football move. This is a good risk, low risk, high ceiling type move for the Patriots, and I think one they're comfortable taking, or else they wouldn't have drafted or signed him, because they didn't sign him on the spot. They clearly have done their due diligence. So Demaryius Thomas finds a new home with the Patriots, and this is a typical Bill Belichick type move. And yeah, new weapon, new guy to scratch your heads on when it comes to fantasy rankings. But we'll move on. Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Doug Baldwin, if you've been with the show for any period of time, we've been telling you about how he still needs additional surgeries. Well, he got his, I think, last one. He had a sports hernia surgery, so now he's going to enter the recovery period for that, and he's got really, honestly, a long way to go. They're hoping to have him back and ready by camp. We'll see how things all work out. And then at the tight end position, Chicago Bears tight end Zach Miller has officially decided to call it a career after suffering that gruesome and life-threatening knee injury back 2 seasons ago. It was 18 months ago that he suffered that knee injury. I think it was in November, and man, that was gruesome. The way his knee twisted and went the wrong way and broke, like, it was cringeworthy, and if you remember, caused vascular problems, and he was bleeding internally, and there was a lot going on with that injury. So the knee would probably never be the same. They've gone out, they acquired Trey Burton, so he kind of lost his role in the offense with the Bears. So I think that this is an unfortunate way to end your career, but nobody's going to look at you and think like you're letting anybody down, or you're not walking away for a real reason after that gruesome of an injury.
At least you're able to walk away from that injury.
Yeah, exactly. You can have your head held high going out on an injury like that. It's not like, oh, I twisted my ankle, so I'm retiring from sports. Like, it's nothing like that. So Zach Miller, we always like to play the Hall of Fame game. He's not going to come close or touch it, but he made some great plays through his career. He was a contributor. So sad to see it end this way, but Zach Miller's out, Trey Burton is in, and that's the way these things go. Next man up. So with that, though, speaking of a tight end, let's move on to our early consensus tight end rankings. Now, as we kind of talked about coming into the show, the top 6, arguably the top 8 guys, I think, personally, are the ones that are worth really investing in. Once you get outside the top really 5 in our consensus, you start getting some serious question marks. So, and as we talked about last year and the year before that, this has been such a dumpster fire of a position that if you don't get one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends, you're not getting anything that's not replaceable anyway. So we have to start at the top of the list. We're actually, the 3 of us were in complete unison through the first 3 guys. So we all have as our number 1 tight end Travis Kelce, Kansas City Chiefs tight end. I think this is an obvious no-brainer. Zach Ertz at number 2, though, a guy you could definitely make an argument for, though he finished 3rd last year. So CJ, tell me why Travis Kelce deserves to be our number 1 tight end consensus in our fantasy rankings at this point of the offseason.
I think it's about body of work. I think it's about the situation he's in, and definitely the offense. So the body of work, he's shown that, he's a very explosive, dynamic tight end that can be able to catch the ball, fluent route runner, and just continue to put himself in good positions with his quarterback, that he's there and he's available, and he got that chemistry with them. Well, Alex Smith and now with Patrick Mahomes. And the system, it's an Andy Reid system, man. I mean, look at the surrounding talents around him, man. So it's not like a defense can be able to solely lock in on getting them. Except the only team I've seen to be able to do that successfully is the Patriots. So that's the only one. Outside of that, this guy's been out there getting money and basically doing his thing, man. So I expect him to have another positive year, and with the Kansas City Chiefs, with Patrick Mahomes, and him to continue to go out there and make that money, man.
Yeah, Travis Kelce was an absolute monster last season. I mean, we talk about these guys that just stood out. He was 20 points ahead of the next guy. And if you go out of that top 3 or 4 that we're talking about before, he was 100 points ahead of the number 6 tight end. That's the kind of gap we're talking about here. Unbelievable contributor, high ceiling. Now, you could make an argument for caution here. Obviously, we know what happened with Kareem Hunt. He's gone. Tyreek Hill, we don't know what to expect. And if this team goes in, because I'm on record for saying this, I'm expecting a regression. I'm expecting a return to the norm in a negative way for Patrick Mahomes this season. I think his touchdown pace was unsustainable. So I'm expecting him to not be nearly as, not nearly. I'm not expecting him to be quite as good as he was last season. He loses weapons, to potentially Tyreek Hill. So if they're going into the season with Sammy Watkins as their top wide receiver, Damian Williams as their running back, and Travis Kelce instead of Kareem Hunt and Tyreek Hill, you have to think that this offense takes a big step backwards. Now, you can make the argument that's a much higher floor for him, and he does make guys miss. He's a mismatch. He's a pure athlete. He's going to get volume. So, yeah, safe floor. But I think his ceiling is a little bit in question here just because you don't know how often this offense is going to be in scoring position compared to how it was a season ago. Now, I mean, clearly, I still think he's the best guy. He's the one that I'm targeting. He's the best tight end this season. But that's just the level of caution that I'm putting out there because there's a lot of change around him potentially, which could really throw off the rest of his season. Now, that being said, we're talking about a guy who went out there last season and he had 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. So, I mean, that's insane for a tight end. But if you go back over the last quarter of the season when they lost Kareem Hunt, I mean, his first week against the Raiders, which it was the Raiders really didn't have a defense, 168 yards and 2 touchdowns, 26.8 fantasy points. Great. 13.7 in week 14, 6.1 in week 15, 5.4 in week 16. So something happened there that they started really rapidly regressing. And the only thing that really stands out was they lost their running game. So that's the only reason I'm preaching a little bit of caution here, but I don't think it's enough caution to take anyone over him because I think his ceiling is that high and his floor is just as high as the next 2 guys on our list. So that's Travis Kelce. Let's move on to that next guy that we already mentioned, Zach Ertz. Where Zach Ertz, to me, you could easily also make the argument to take him number 1 because Zach Ertz, and this is your team, CJ, so you can weigh in on this. I see Zach Ertz, honestly, as their top target in the receiving game right now. Well, what are your thoughts?
Pretty much. I mean, as it goes right now, yes, you got the addition of Deshaun Jackson there, Jordan Howard. So, you look at this offense and you'll be able to see, how explosive it's going to be on paper. But I still think they're top pass catcher. They're the most valuable option on this offense. Right, even with all the 2 additions that's going on right there, it's still Zach Ertz. I mean, he's the most guy that Carson Wentz looks for. A lot of people can make an argument that say that he looked his way a little bit too much last season.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, look, the guy put up numbers. The guy was successful. He, PPR, he was a darling for you. You loved every bit of it. And now he's gotten to the point where he's put himself in this position where we're talking about him arguably number 1 tight end. I feel like if we get another season of what Zach Ertz did, I do expect a little bit of a drop off, but if we can get another really good season from him like he did last year, then I honestly think he's probably going to be the number 1 tight end going in future fantasy football seasons because it's undoubtedly. I mean, he's got rid of the stigma of him being Mr. November and all that other.
Yeah, he got rid of that a couple years ago.
Yeah, he got rid of all that. So he's starting to put together a couple good seasons. Man, I think he does one more, then he's no doubtedly going to be the number 1 tight end.
He put up 1,163 yards, 8 touchdowns, a solid season. There's no denying that. And yeah, despite all the weapons that there are in Philadelphia, obviously Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson, despite how you feel, I think that Nelson Aguilar is pretty good in the slot. They have plenty of good running backs with Jordan Howard, Corey Clement, these guys that are kind of interchangeable behind them. Zach Ertz is clearly, to me, the top target in this offense for Carson Wentz. So I think his floor is very high. Because of that, his ceiling is high. He's also a guy that's advanced in basically every statistical category in the last 3 years. I mean, he's gone up in receptions. He's gone up in yards. He's he averaged 8 touchdowns each of the last 2 years. He got 8 touchdowns in 2017 and 2018, which is a very good baseline for a tight end. So if you can pencil him in for another 8 and over 1,000 yards, that's an incredibly high floor for a position that usually, like, we had one guy in our rankings that was a top 12 guy last year that we were just talking before the show, had 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was his season. So the tight ends are wildly unpredictable. So when it comes to a guy who's a focal point of an offense like this, like a Rob Gronkowski would have been before his retirement, so obviously you won't hear him on this list, that's a guy you want to target. So Zach Ertz, again, these top 3 guys I think are mostly interchangeable, but to me it's honestly Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz as that number 1 spot, and then I would throw the next guy we're going to talk about, George Kittle, in with the next tier of guys, because I'm a big fan of tiering. We haven't talked about draft philosophy too much yet this offseason, but I'm a big believer in not just ranking your players but also tiering them, so you know it might be worth the risk of passing up on a guy to get a guy in the same tier later on. It's a whole nother thing. We'll get into that later. So let's talk about that next guy, number 3 on our list, San Francisco 49ers tight end George Kittle. George Kittle, again, unanimously number 3 on all of our rankings. He had a great season, actually getting more yards than Travis Kelce did. He edged out Kelce with 1,377 yards. The reason that he did not beat Kelce in fantasy was because he got half the touchdowns. Kelce got 10, Kittle got 5. So George Kittle, though, clearly a focal point in the 49ers offense, and an offense that honestly has not done much to upgrade this offseason. We thought they were going to be in on Antonio Brown. They didn't get Antonio Brown. We heard some rumors that they were possibly trying to trade for and acquire Odell Beckham Jr. Clearly that didn't happen either. So they went out and they signed Jordan Matthews. Not a huge upgrade for them. So now this is really Marquise Goodwin, Jordan Matthews, and Dante Pettis, I think, would be their top 3 wide receivers right now. Right. And that's with a coming back from being really banged up Jimmy Garoppolo. And the running game is kind of suspect because we don't know where it's going to go with all they signed Tevin Coleman to be there with Jerick McKinnon, who they paid way too much money for last year. They have Matt Breida there, which we like. There's a lot of these interchangeable pieces. So we don't know how to clearly define this offense, but we have faith in Kyle Shanahan, and despite all this chaos around him, there is a clear starting tight end here with George Kittle. So we know he's going to be on the field. We know he's going to give production. We know he's going to give volume. So this is a guy who I think we can comfortably know has a high floor with high ceiling upside, because he's, I think, one of their biggest red zone weapons as well, despite only getting 5 touchdowns last year. CJ, what are your thoughts on George Kittle?
I think he's definitely a guy that definitely earned and got my respect and attention last season. I mean, a guy that went through 3 quarterbacks and he still put up these numbers. I mean, that is very impressive. I mean, so that's something you got to take account of. But just like you said, with the situation, what's going on with him, you got to expect him to be able to still put up numbers and his position in this offense to not be questioned. I mean, look, there's no true threat on this team right now, where, with the draft still pending, where you're looking at it and you go like, well, I think this guy is going to take away from Kittle. No, Kittle should be the number 1 option in this offense, because everybody else around him, as it stands right now, is just role players. So I'm expecting Kittle to have a good, a solid season. If we can get Jimmy G to be healthy this year, I really want to see what type of magic those two can be able to make on the field and fantasy wise, because like we said, like I mentioned, man, this guy Kittle just went through 3 quarterbacks last year and he could still be able to put up good numbers. So what if the main guy, he gets to play all those games? What are the numbers going to look like with that? So that's my intrigue, because I like Jimmy G, and I think that those 2 guys can put up some good numbers.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be very interesting to see his ceiling with a full, this is a team that has completely bought into based on everything we're hearing. Of course, it's all coach speak right now, but they traded for a guy that they seem to be behind in Jimmy Garoppolo, their starting quarterback. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's move on to the next guy on the list, where we finally have a little bit of division here. And of course, CJ is the biggest hater, but only by 1 point, so not that big. And that is Indianapolis Colts tight end Eric Ebron. So Eric Ebron, for starters, he was really good last season. He didn't get a ton of yardage. Outside those top 3 guys, nobody broke 1,000 yards at the tight end position. He got 750, but he also got you 13 14 receiving touchdowns, which is an unsustainable pace, I think, but I mean, that's great to look at. He also ran the ball for a touchdown, so he got you 14 touchdowns total. So this is a guy who is used a lot in the offense, and with the additions made to the offense, I think is going to have less coverage on him, and I think he will be very, very, very productive this season, and that's with Jack Doyle even coming back, because I think he very much set himself apart and kind of cemented his role in this offense. So CJ, you're razor thin. You're one spot lower. What are your thoughts on Eric Ebron?
Eric Ebron, look, I think it was a solid season for him, especially from what we've known of Eric Ebron in Detroit. So this is a breath of fresh air. Do I see it continually? Well, listen, I think with Jack Doyle coming back, that does warrant an eyebrow raise. With the addition of Devin Funches, and then whatever they're going to be able to do in the running game, all those are going to be a factor. Now, look, I still think if they improve the running game, and that might be, if they even believe in Marlon Mack, they want to keep him there, and they want to improve the running game by improving the offensive line a little bit more. That's going to play a factor because it means Max going to get more catches, more carries, and be able to move the ball more. And that might be where Eric Ebron can be able to score more in the red zone. But I do think Andrew Luck does love him some Jack Doyle. So, this is a situation in this offense where both of these guys can be able to still be productive. I'm only one position shorter because I like the next guy we're going to talk about. I like him a little more than Eric Ebron. But look, that's my only thing. I just think that Jack Doyle plays a factor. I think Devin Funches plays a factor, and then them improving an offensive line plays a factor too. And I think that's going to take away from Eric Ebron.
I mean, it's a valid argument. I like. Let me put it out there. I expect Jack Doyle to get his. I think Jack Doyle he'll probably end the season with 3 or 4 touchdowns and probably somewhere in the 400 to 600 yard range. But that's because he's going to be, in my opinion, backing up Eric Ebron, who's going to be out there probably 80% of the time, unless they're doing 2 tight end sets. So, I mean, and again, that's how quickly the tight end position falls off. He got 14 touchdowns last season. I don't think we're expecting that. I expect his yardage maybe to go up and his touchdowns to maybe be around double digits, but not 14. So that's kind of where he just lands for me because it's dropping fast, ladies and gentlemen. How our optimism for the tight end position. So yeah, Eric Ebron, he's going to be a little polarizing, but I mean his season last season was just undeniably good and a career season for him as well. I mean that was his first season with the Colts after being with the Lions for the previous 4 seasons on his rookie deal. This was a highly sought after first round pick, and in his first season with the Colts he put up a career high in receptions, yardage, tied his best average yards per catch, and a by far record in touchdowns. I mean, he had more touchdowns in that one season than I think he did his entire time with the Lions. So I think that the Colts will find ways to use him, and I think that he has the potential to exceed these numbers, but we're preaching caution here because, again, tight ends are a little bit of a dumpster fire. So let's keep moving to the next guy on our list, which I was thinking I might have been a little high on, but then Jason's right in exact pace with me, and you're a 1 spot higher on him, so this is the flip-flop with Eric Ebron and this guy, which is Hunter Henry. So Hunter Henry obviously missed almost all of last season with an injury. He is the starting tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. They brought back Antonio Gates. Gates is now currently gone. And why are you so high? Why are we, honestly, but why are you so much higher on Hunter Henry? You have him as your number 4 tight end.
Listen, the only downside that I have on Hunter Henry is the injuries. That's the only thing, but that's a thing that you really can't predict. I mean, because going into last season, he basically, he had a blank canvas right there in front of him, man. The Chargers had all these things going right for them as far as the offense, bringing back these rookies that didn't really get to play. So this is going to be their really first year cracking on there. The offensive line was playing great. Then all of a sudden we get hit with this freak injury that took him out for most of the year. So, that was a blower, and that's where I can see a lot of people spreading caution because they're saying, this dude has yet to be healthy. But when he's on the field, the dude is amazing. I mean, this guy is that guy. No doubtably, he's in a system where Phillip Rivers goes through his progression, and most of the time, Hunter Henry is open. He's getting him the ball. He's getting the ball, and he's getting production in this offense. So look, I like him because of the offense. I like him because everything that's going around him. That's a plus for him. He's a guy where I'm not looking for him to be uh, a solid yards guy. I'm looking for him more in the red zone, and that's kind of where he got his money a couple seasons ago when he was healthy, was the red zone, and he got decent yardage for you, and he was okay in PPR. But I was thinking about those touch. I was going for those red zones and that touchdown, which Philip Rivers gave him the opportunity, and he capitalized on those.
Yeah, the problem with Hunter Henry is we're buying into the optimism. That's my take on it.
That's the only
We,
thing. Yeah.
we've seen the connection with Antonio Gates before Antonio Gates became so old he probably should have been in a wheelchair. We have seen how good this offense is and how much they like to throw the ball, and even in the red zone how much they like to use it. And we've seen that upside. I mean, going back to the rookie year when they were still the San Diego Chargers in 2016, Hunter Henry, not a lot of receptions, I should say, not a ton of yards. He's never gotten to 600 yards, but 8 touchdowns on 36 receptions. That's a crazy touchdown pace. So we're thinking with a full season, that could be awesome, especially with how good this offense was last year. We're buying into the upside here at obviously banking on the fact he's going to be healthy. So, I mean, I, like you, I'm one spot behind you. I have him as my number 5. You have him as the number 4. And that's how quickly the waters get really murky. We're super optimistic on the first 3 or 4 guys. And now there's all these question marks about what should be, could be, and what hopefully won't happen to prevent the upside that we're buying into. So, yeah, Hunter Henry, a guy that we like. We're big fans of him on the show here, but I'm already preaching a lot of caution here because we have yet to see a full 16 games out of this guy. And this is his 4th season he's going into. With that being said, let's move on to the next guy on our list, which we both have at 6, and Jason down lower at 7, why is that? Oh, because he's still high on another guy who I wish he was here to talk about. But our consensus number 6 is Evan Ingram. Now, for me, and I'm on record for saying this, I am buying Evan Ingram to have a great year this year because Odell Beckham Jr. is gone. So those targets have to go somewhere, and that'll be dispersed. But Evan Ingram, he has been really good in his first 2 seasons. If you go back to his rookie year where it was just him and Sterling Shepard because, Odell went down. 15 games played, 722 yards, 6 touchdowns. Pretty good. Really good rookie season, and he's a better player now than he was then. Last year he missed some time. He was playing through injuries. Obviously, Odell Beckham we talked about Zach Ertz and how they were saying arguably he commanded too many targets. That was Odell Beckham Jr. last year for the Giants. I mean, I am high on Evan Ingram based on what is considered, what you need to have for a good floor at tight end to be in these rankings, and I think his ceiling is very high. Bringing in Golden Tate doesn't scare me. Golden Tate's going to help move the offense, but I think Evan Ingram's still going to get his. This is a guy who I currently am expecting to, theoretically, I have him playing all 16 games, getting you probably somewhere in the 70-plus receptions range, 850-ish yards, and I have him penciled in for about 7 touchdowns. So that lands him right about where he is right now, and that bests his rookie season, which is his best on record. CJ, what are your thoughts?
I think once again, I agree with everything that you're basically saying. My only thing with him, my only downside with Evan Ingram, why I have him this low, is kind of where I'm at with Hunter Henry, but I have less optimism because I'm like, when is this dude going to stay healthy? Like, he had basically a really good opportunity last year to be able to cement himself as that next guy. So can he be able to double that down from his rookie year with Odell being down again? And then he just it was just times where he just disappeared. He was just off. He was just not playing. And then we're like, dang, was he on the injury report? And it was just one of those game time decisions where now you're just stuck. You have him in your lineup and you're stuck because you can't get him out of there because they just waited last minute to say that he's going to be out. So
Yep.
look, I feel like a lot of people are going to be burned by that. I think now if you can be able to get him later in drafts, I'm all for it. Just like you, man. I think you should be able to go buy into that because the upside is there. It's just I think recency bias right now. He burned a lot of people last year with those injuries, man. But in the situation that he's in a great situation for him to be that guy. I think he's earned Eli's trust. He can be able to still produce in this system. It's not a lot. I mean, Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate. I don't think there are bigger names for you to be scared off. Where Evan Ingram's not going to be able to get touches.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well said. We'll just leave it there. So let's move on to the next guy on our list. We're both, again, we agree. We both have him at 7. Jason one step lower at 8 because the next guy on our list he's got above the two guys that we're now talking about, and that is the now New Orleans Saints, previously Tennessee Titan, St. Louis Ram, Green Bay Packer, and Oakland Raider tight end Jared Cook. Well traveled. He's a journeyman. So he has 11 years experience. He's going into his age 30. He's already has birthday. Yeah. So age 32 season, which is, it's pretty up there. But I mean, athletic ability, we saw it last year on a bad team with the Raiders. He was their top receiver, 68 yards, played all 16 games, just under 900 yards receiving, and 6 receiving touchdowns. And we think, and this is the optimism here, and this is why we have him ranked so high. I mean, that floor, that was pretty darn good. I mean, that was enough to get him the tight end 5, I think it was, last season. So that's pretty good. And we think that his ceiling could exceed that because now he's going to the Saints, and every tight end that goes to the Saints, we think is going to fill that Jimmy Graham role. And so why wouldn't you? Drew Brees has a long track record of making his tight end a number 1, or if he wasn't the number 1, the number 2 tight end in fantasy. And that was at a time when tight ends were a lot more productive than they've been the last couple of years. So we're buying into that hype. We're buying into the athletic ability. We're buying into the fact that he is a much better tight end than anyone they've had since the aforementioned Jimmy Graham. But I think we also have him down this low, at least 7 for us, 8 for Jason, because the new place thing is scary, and he is 32 years old, going to a new team with a new quarterback. Well, now he's done this many times. He's gone to a lot of different teams, and so you think he knows how to travel and how to adjust quickly. And there haven't been massive drop-offs as he's gone from team to team. I mean, some places he upgraded, going from like the Titans to the St. Louis Rams. He saw a pretty decent uptake in his production. Going from the Rams to the Packers, we saw a decrease, but that's because of the team philosophy. Saints know how to use the tight end. I'm not worried about it. CJ, what say you?
Yeah, me either. I'm not really worried about it either. I think this is a good situation for him. He could have a career year, or he can have a okay year. It just depends on how this offense goes. But I do know that with the recent tight end activity going on and with the Saints, this is definitely an upgrade. It's a plus, and I think Sean Payton is going to find out ways to be able to contribute to merge him into this offense, and for him to be able to shine and have plays just for him to be able to do things. So yeah, that's what I think. I think Jared Cook's going to be. I think he's going to have a good year with the Saints this year.
I agree. Let's move on. Next guy on our list, again, I have him at 8. You're the lowest at 9. Not surprised by that. But Jason, much higher than us at 6. That is the guy we just talked about briefly. We mentioned him, Jimmy Graham. Now, Jimmy Graham, this is a guy who, if you go back to his New Orleans Saints days, I mean, this is a guy who was constantly putting up double-digit touchdowns. Like his last 2 seasons, 1,200 yards and 16 touchdowns in one season with the Saints, and then a 900-yard and 10 touchdown season in his last 2 years with the Saints. So then he goes to the Seahawks, where they don't throw the ball as much, not nearly as effectively. There's a lot of reasons you could talk about why he did not succeed with the Saints, and yet he still was giving you productive years. His last year there, not a lot of yardage, 520 yards, but still 10 touchdowns. He still is a big red zone weapon. He might not have the separation speed for the yardage anymore, but I think he's still very much a guy who in the red zone is extremely dangerous. And this is a guy who we say this every year. When we like a situation, you have to be worried about the new face in a new place. He went to the Packers. We all jumped on board of what could be with this incredibly high red zone efficient. They throw the ball a lot in the red zone quarterback with Aaron Rodgers and the offensive philosophy. Green Bay Packers, they were derailed very early last season. I mean, we talk about how the reports are now coming out that Aaron Rodgers had a tibial plateau fracture, that he got hurt in week 1. Obviously, that is a massive injury. Like that is something that usually, if it's a serious one, that's described as when your knee tries to dislocate and it doesn't, so your knee just breaks. Your knee shatters. That's what that kind of tier of injury is. It's when it's in the knee, or if it's right below it, that's the upper shin that breaks. So it's a serious injury. I'm not saying that his was to that level, because obviously he wouldn't have been playing. But I mean, I'm sure he had some sort of hairline fraction there. Had to be painful. Obviously affected his mobility and his play. And we talked about how, despite having a really down year through a serious injury, he still went out and put up the quarterback 6 numbers. Now Jimmy Graham has another year in the system. He's got this incredibly high efficiency red zone passing, like best in the league for years years in Aaron Rodgers, a guy who loves to throw the ball because he wants the ball, he wants to win on his own shoulders. And now they bring in offensive-minded head coach in Matt LaFleur, who has worked with all the best young offensive coordinators in the league. Kyle Shanahan, he's worked with Sean McVay. I think that he is going to be, despite his age, I mean, Jimmy Graham, he's going to turn 33 late in the season, but I think we saw enough last year to know that he has the floor and he's got enough positive things working around him to build him a ceiling where this is a guy who could easily, to me, outperform where we have him as our tight end 8 consensus. I have him there just because some of the guys that I have ahead of him, I think I like a little bit more as a safe floor, and we got burned a little bit. I want to see it in training camp. That's just kind of where I'm at with him. I could easily move him up in my rankings, which is going to be polarizing because he burned a lot of people last year. 600 yards and 2 touchdowns. People drafted him high. He was a top 3 in a lot of people's draft boards. Usually saw him somewhere in the 5-6 range, and he burned people bad. So I understand that people are going to want to pass on him, but I'm saying give it a year. You know, the year passed. We're now into the second year. That's usually if we like the situation. Sometimes it takes a year to get rolling. So I'm still in on Jimmy Graham, not as all in, but I'm still in on Jimmy Graham. CJ, obviously you're a little bit lower, not much lower. I thought you were going to be a lot lower than you are. Honestly, what are your thoughts on Jimmy Graham?
Literally everything you just said was going through my head. Literally, I mean, just a couple of things for phrasings different, but that's how I feel about Jimmy Graham. And look, I think the talent is there. It's just that, man, it's just that last year, man, was such a blower, man, such a burn. I think that taste, I definitely know that taste is going to leave it's a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth going into this upcoming draft, man. I don't see a lot of people going to be buying into him. Now, look, yes, you got a better situation as far as the coaching staff, you know, more offensive minded. All those things is a plus, but I still think people are still going to be like, look, I've crossed that bridge before. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm gonna go look somewhere else. Which is gonna help you out, because if you're a believer, if you're in the mindset like Griffin and I that still think, hey, you know, it was just a bad system. This is a better system for him. Maybe we're gonna get a better return out of Jimmy Graham. Then you can be able to get this guy later. You don't have to spend so much money, or even you know, go up a round or a couple picks before, which you really want to get Jimmy Graham. So for me, look, I think he's still there. He's got a good quarterback. The offensive minded coach now that's there, that's going to be a plus. I honestly still need to see it from me because I'm still a little icky about Jimmy Graham with the Packers. So I'm on the same line as you. I still want to see it. I do like the pluses there. I think there's good upside, but you got to show me first. You got to show me first before I can start, going goo goo gaga like I was last year.
There you go, the upside and the downside. Let's move on to the next guy on our list, and that is the number 8 tight end last year, number 9 in our rankings, David Njoku. Now, Cleveland Browns tight end. We liked what we saw last year, I think. Despite this offense, took a little while to get its footing and to cement its running game and its quarterback position. But this offense got going. The Browns, we were talking about how they're going to take a step forward this year, and we liked David Njoku to be a big part of that. I for one, thought he was going to definitely get a decent uptick in touchdowns. The reason that we don't have that reflected, and in fact have him regressed based on his finish last year in our rankings, is because they bring in Odell Beckham Jr., who is going to be a target hog. He's going to, between him, Jarvis Landry, and the running backs there, they're going to take up a lot of the volume. It is... David Njoku is going to win you weeks. He's going to have a week here and there where he just puts up an unbelievable stat line, I believe, because we know he has the athleticism. We know he has the ability. We know he's on an offense that's going to be in scoring position a lot. Great defense. They're going to win a lot of field position battles, and an offense that's going to move the ball. They're going to be in the red zone, and he's a big body guy, 6'4", 246 pounds. He's only 22 years old. He's going to be 23 at the start of the season. Super athletic, good hands. I think that he has the absolute upside to have a ceiling to give you tight, upper echelon tight end 1 numbers week to week. But it's all the other mouths to feed around him that drives down, I think, his floor, which is why we are preaching a little bit caution here, and we have him in our bottom third of our tight end 1s. So as our tight end 9, what are your thoughts, CJ?
I'm saying the same thing. I think that he's going to be a good tight end for you. You can be able to still pick him up. He's going to produce, but it's just, the optimism that we had last year before they started doing the trades and picking up people, all that, I think you gotta bring it all down, because it's just like you said, there's way too many mouths to feed there. It's not gonna be consistent. Those great games that he's gonna have, I don't see that consistently gonna be having week after week after week. I think he's gonna have like a really good game that's gonna win you weeks, just like you said, and then there's gonna be blah games, a lot of blah games for me, and so that makes him come down a lot to me. Unless there's injuries that happen to this team when it comes to the receiver position, he's gonna be you know, uh, I don't know, a starter go tight end, starter go.
Yeah, boom bust guy. Low floor, high ceiling, I think, week to week. Next guy on our list, though, a guy that we were all super high on. Really, we were high on his teammate, and then they drafted this guy, and then we had to get on board with him because we saw the potential. Well, we knew the potential, and we saw it in action. Man, it's getting to if OJ Howard, let me just get the name out there. If OJ Howard was to hit the open market, I think that a lot of teams would be really excited to get his services, and I think that his floor would be very, very high. I mean, you and I both have him higher than the last guy, David Njoku. He would be higher in our rankings, but Jason, I think, is being a realist and has him down at 13, has a tight end too, which honestly is where I want to have him, but I just know the opportunity that there is in Tampa Bay. Now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we've seen it over his career that he's able to put up really good production. But there's a lot of things, honestly, let's put it this way, working against him. For starters, plus, they lost Adam Humphries. They lost a couple other wide receiving weapons there, so there's less mouths to feed in the passing game. That's a plus. Now for all the negatives. Cameron Brate, a guy we all really like, he's still there. That's not good. And then let's not forget that they bring in Bruce Arians, a guy who notoriously does not feature his tight ends in his very productive offensive schemes. He likes to use his tight ends as pass blockers and run blockers. They're just blocking tight ends all the time. So when he does use them, they're usually kind of dink and dunk kind of things. These are things that are working against him. Now, the only positive, so that's one positive to two negatives, and this is where I even it out for me. The other positive, we go back to Jameis Winston, who has a long history of loving to use his tight ends, and he has a good rapport with OJ Howard. So this is why I think that he's going to be polarizing, because we don't know. The ceiling is easily around where we have him now. The floor could be where Jason has him now. And I personally feel like I'm too high on him, but that's just kind of the dumpster fire players that he's now in. Like these guys, you could easily make an argument as to why they're not going to work out. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, CJ?
Well, for me right now, when you start looking at these this is the tier of tight ends that we're talking about here. Outside of the top five, everything else is just like, it's just going to be on you. Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, you're like, you know what? I really like the upside of this. So for me, I'm like this. I'm thinking that Bruce Arians, he's looking at this roster, he's looking at what he has, and what he needs to continue to work on. I think when he looks at the tight end position, yes, history has shown that he does not use his tight ends well. He really doesn't even. I mean, when I go back and look at Arizona, he really didn't even have a tight end like that.
That's the counter argument. Ricky Seals-Jones. What's he gonna do?
You know what I'm saying? He didn't really have a tight end at that position that was athletic enough and had the ability to just go out there and just moss people. OJ Howard, Cameron Brate, those guys are the guys he has on his team right now. So maybe that he. I believe that he will, modify his offense to fit that, because he has these talented pieces there. So look, he's got that going on. I see a upgrade on Jameis this year now because of Bruce Arians. So those are the pluses for me that why I have OJ Howard where I have him instead of a little further down. Yeah, because of the negatives. So that's just me. I think there's more positive there, and we'll see that than what people have.
Yeah, I'm not going to say you beat me to a point, because I kind of lost my train of thought when I was talking about Bruce Arians, but that was going to be a point that I made. Yeah, he hasn't had a tight end the caliber of the ones he has here with OJ Howard, Cameron Brate. OJ Howard is the number one there, and I don't think he's going to move the wide receivers. I mean, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which I'm of course very high on both these guys. They're I think set in their roles, but they lost their slot guys. I mean, obviously, they lost their burner with Deshaun Jackson, but they've got other pieces I think that can fill that role. But they lost Adam Humphries. They need a slot guy, and I think who better to use as your slot guy than a guy like OJ Howard? I mean, one of these big-bodied, sure-hand, athletic pass catchers. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, obviously that was the role that Larry played in Bruce Arians' offense, and that was very productive for Larry at times. And you could put in a 6'6", 250-pound tight end. There's no way that that's not getting covered by a safety or honestly a linebacker very easily. So, I mean, this is a guy that they're going to have to devote serious coverage to if they're rolling him out that way. So I think he gets used. I think he's going to get a good amount of volume. And that's why I have him as my number, I have him at 9, you have him at 8. And I could make an argument. I could make a world where I moved him up. It's just the guys ahead of him, I think, have a safer floor.
It's crowded up. I don't know.
It's crowded. There's a lot of upside with all tight ends. There's a lot of upside, but it's the floor that's basically non-existent for a lot of them. All right, rapid fire. Last two guys. Number 11, we have Delanie Walker. Delanie Walker, I think we're all just fading on because we don't like the Tennessee Titans passing game. Despite how productive he was last year, there's always the injury risk, and then there's the fact that he's yet another year older. What are your thoughts, CJ?
He is the default button. He is the default button in Tennessee. If anything, Mariota goes to him. That's it.
that is the extent of what I want to add to this conversation. But I mean, it's factual. Delanie Walker, I mean, he's been that guy for Marcus Mariota since, he got there. And he's been his most consistent weapon. Now, last year, of course, he played in one game, got hurt early. That sucks. But if we go back to 2017, 74 receptions, 800 yards, 3 touchdowns. So the touchdowns are what really hurts his value. Now, this is all being said about a guy who's going to be 35 years old to start the season, which is, again, why we faded him. Missed time to injury last year. There's a lot of reasons to fade Delanie Walker. But if you want to take a shot, a late-round flyer, and a guy who could return to that value, I mean, his last 2 seasons, if we go back to 2016, where we were really kind of coming off of a good high on him. Again, 800 yards, 7 touchdowns. If you want to shoot for something like that, I mean, sure, why not take a shot at him? We're getting into a world where, again, it's all high ceiling guys with incredibly questionable floors. Like the next guy on our list, Kyle Rudolph, a guy that we thought for sure was going to work out, and I think we might be a year early on him. He could work out this year with the Vikings, and now with Kirk Cousins being in town. Zimmer likes to use his tight ends in the past, but it's been very inconsistent. Kirk Cousins has shown it during his time in Washington that he loves to use his tight ends, but I think that he has 2 superstar wide receivers, possibly the best wide receiver duo in the league right now, and these are guys that are going to command a lot of targets, and I think Kyle Rudolph kind of gets lost in the shuffle, easily the 3rd guy in the progression, and that's why it's hard to get super excited about a guy like Kyle Rudolph, where a good number of the guys we've talked about before are, some of them, the number 1 in their offense, and a lot of them the number 2 in the progression. So what are your thoughts on Kyle Rudolph, CJ, because you're actually higher on him than I am?
Yeah, I think this is the guy that's got lost in the shuffle last year because Kirk Cousins was still learning a new scheme, a new system, and they went through a offensive coordinator change during the season as well. So I think that he got lost in the shuffle and everything like that. Adam Thielen was having a great year. Stephon Diggs was doing good. The running game was non-existent, so that was hurting him. But in the passing game. So, I think there was a lot of other things going on, but I think Kyle Rudolph, he's shown you that he still is that guy. Now it's all going to be about, can he, get back and get that magic with Kirk Cousins? We see the history Kirk Cousins has with his tight ends. Can they get it going this year? I think they can. I've seen reports saying with Kirk Cousins, the more comfortable and familiar he gets with the playbook, the more he wants to be able to get other players involved. So maybe that's what it is going on. So that's it.
Yeah, this is also a team that defense basically didn't show up last year. I think they'll be in scoring position more, which will help his touchdown total because he went from 8 touchdowns in 2017 with the rotation of quarterbacks to bring in Kirk Cousins, which we thought was an upgrade over everybody they had there, and he dropped down to 4. He got half the touchdowns. I think that's going to regress more back to the norm. I think he's going to get probably 7-8 touchdowns this year, I think pretty comfortably. Get you at least the 600 yards he got you last year, and that easily puts him higher than where even we have him ranked, I think. But it's the projecting that is the question mark because we haven't seen it yet with Kirk Cousins being there. But I have faith it happens. Again, these rankings are a living thing, and I'm probably going to shuffle them by the time this is even done posting. So by the time you're listening to this, we always say that our ranks are different, and every show that we've done of these, that's been the case, and that's probably going to be no different here. So our tight ends 1 through 12. Number 1, we have Travis Kelce. Number 2, we have Zach Ertz. Number 3, George Kittle. Number 4, Eric Ebron. Number 5, Hunter Henry. Number 6, Evan Ingram. Number 7, Jared Cook. Number 8, Jimmy Graham. Number 9, David Njoku. Number 10, OJ Howard. Number 11, Delaney Walker. And number 12, Kyle Rudolph. Rapid fire the next handful of guys, because some people believe in drafting multiple tight ends. I'm not among them, but you'll see that a lot in your drafts. People try and get their bench player, their waiver wire guy, their injury fill-in, whatever the case may be. Number 13, we have Trey Burton, a guy who finished number, 6 last year, but we have him down at 13. We could talk about this more, but I mean, for me, it's just this offense was not very productive for anybody in the pass catching game last year. A good offense, a good team, but I mean, it wasn't a huge fantasy offense. So I'm just hedging my bets here, and I'm thinking that some of the wide receivers are going to take a step forward. Again, we don't have to deep dive on any of these guys, but I feel like that deserved a little bit of an explanation. Anything you want to add?
No, you pretty much said it.
Yeah, I think his ceiling is very much a probably tight end, probably where he finished last year, honestly, 7-6 range. Yeah. But it's risk mitigation. Could be more.
It all depends on Trubisky, what he does.
See, I'm not convinced that Trubisky is going to be a fantasy friendly tight end there. I don't think he's going to be a big statistical guy.
He's taking a step back this year?
I don't know if he's taking a step back. I just don't know that if he's going to be a high flying quarterback that's going to be able to give you fantasy production year in and year out. I think he's going to have seasons, but I don't think he's, based on what I've seen thus far, I haven't seen it yet. I think he's a good leader of the offense. I just don't know of how good the arm talent is. Number 13, we have Tyler Eifert. Wow, unanimously we all have him at 14. That's kind of crazy. We're all in lockstep there. It's injuries. He can't stay healthy. He's missed more games in his career than he's played, so that's what it is. Vance McDonald, Pittsburgh Steelers only tight end now at 15. We have Austin Hooper down at 16. We have Austin Seferian-Jenkins, the new New England Patriots tight end at 17, which a lot of people are going to shake their heads at. They're like, what? He's filling Gronk's role. Yeah, but he's not Gronk. We have seen flashes, and I think we could get a great season out of him, and you could see a world where he finishes as probably a low-end 1, but he's not Gronk. Let's be clear. Mm-hmm. And then Jordan Reed down at 18 for us, and that's, again, injuries. He's been super productive. And yeah, that's those are some of the other tight ends that we're keeping an eye on as of this point. But that's going to do it for us today. Make sure you guys tune in on Tuesday when we will be back, and it will be our NFL draft. Basically, preparation. We'll be giving you the names you need to know as you go into the draft a couple of days later. We are, as of this recording, 6 days, 14 hours, 8 minutes away from the draft. So I'll let you guys do the math on what time we're recording this if you're not here live on Twitch with us. But yeah. It's coming fast. So we're going to have one show to give you guys a bunch of names that you need to familiarize yourself, names to look out for, and their fantasy possible impacts based on their potential landing spots on Tuesday's show. And then after the draft, it's going to nuke everything we just did and blow it all up, and these rankings will be relatively for nothing because it's going to shuffle things. But we have a good baseline to go off of now, as do you, for all of you going out doing your early draft rankings, guys that have to set their keepers or their dynasty picks. And a lot of you have to do that pre the rookie drafts. So that's what we're doing this for. Hopefully this was beneficial. Feel free to message us. Easiest way to do it on Twitter at the FF Fanatics. That's the best way to get questions in, or via email to thefantasyfootballfanatics@gmail.com. Those are your best options, but you can reach us almost anywhere, just telling you where you're more likely to get a response. And so yeah, make sure you subscribe, rate, review, follow the show wherever you're listening, subscribe. Any parting thoughts before we sign off, CJ?
Hey guys, we're here. Hit us up on Twitter, man. So I love answering questions, anything draft, keeper, trade related.
Yeah,
I'm your guy, man. Just let me know.
And if there's one thing that is true about this show, is that all three of us have drastically different approaches to fantasy football, and all of us have been very successful in our fantasy football careers through those different, which is why our head-to-head leagues are always interesting. But so if you have somebody who your draft philosophy or your player analysis resonates more with, feel free to reach out individually. Again, I'm at G Palmer FFF. CJ's at CJ Hickman 89. Jason's at Jason Cabrera 13, all on Twitter. We'll get back to you guys. We'll do our best to. We get flooded with questions and comments, but we do our best to get back. So with that, we're out of here, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your Easter weekend. We will see you, if you celebrate it, of course. We'll see you on Tuesday. Bye, guys.